was a new traffic blockage where we didn't expect it. It's not that I'm being fashionably late. So thank you. First of all, let me recognize Mr. Mohammed Yahya of the United Nations holding office and court here. Mr. Asif Shirazi, leading light of Islamic relief. Mr. Bilal Anwar, NDRMF, partner in many alliances, Dunia, who has left, and Nathan, Naif of Asian Development Bank. I think he's with us or not, I'm not sure. All right. So, good morning once again. I think we've had a long and productive morning in reflecting on how we have been building resilience in Pakistan, and I think lessons from 2022 must have been discussed. But what to me is important here is that the work this partnership is doing in the two provinces that are under mentioned, particularly vulnerable to unpredictability and the high volatility the world is facing. What you're doing, in my mind, before going into some specifics, is creating an environment where there is less or no fear of the morning or the morning after. Because disaster is coming without a calling card, it is coming to people's doorsteps in ways that were never mapped or planned for. And climate change and stress is bringing such high unpredictability to livelihoods, to lives, to dignities, to communities who have been very often forgotten because of the overstretch in national and sometimes we are told international resources, that it has become now imperative to build in disaster risk reduction in all planning. And when we say this and we walk away. What happens to those people, their livelihoods, their livestock, their agriculture, and the front lines of the fragility they live on is something that goes unmapped and unheard. And why I say this is because it's not that there's a lack of focus from either the state or the provinces that are undergoing their own transformations as we face an accelerating series of impacts of climate stress, but also because we have large populations, and large populations do face a series of stresses when resources, particularly natural resources, become scarce or a source of competition and become, unavailable, shall we like, often. And that goes for water, that goes for agriculture, that goes for the livelihood that sustains many of the people. So here you've concentrated on Chargi and the 4 districts of Balochistan that really needed the attention, Chagai and others, Quetta as well as I think 4 others. And now you also have been looking at the Poet Suleiman range in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, particularly in Dera Ismail Khan. And I remember this Poet Suleiman mountain area which created pools of flooding and sudden risk for communities living there. All these communities have lived there for centuries. This is an old area, an old civilization, and the rivers that run through our country invite settlement, not the prospect of disaster. In any case, Quetta is not near a river, it's the only city in Pakistan that's not. In any case, the point now is, I'm not going to go on too long, you've given your shields, everything has happened, and I don't want to prolong this. But I think what needs to be said here is that we need to create local and provincial priorities for communities at highest risk, including women and old people, and there are many stories, I believe, that you have seen about such fragility and vulnerability being met with plans and resources of rebuilding, as well as creating an awareness of risk and systems that can bring some level of daily predictability or warning of disaster to countries. So, why I say this is because disaster risk reduction, adaptation, resilience, all of these 3 things have not been priorities at the global level. Not really, because had they been, you'd be hearing, talking, and spending much more on it and investing much more on it, much more than we do today. But while we have to look to our own solutions, particularly community-based, because those are the most successful, they enable people on the ground to partner with other actors such as yourselves, agents of change, and philanthropy, and state and multilateral resource to bring power and currency to solutions that they can handle in their own language, that they can understand and they can manage. Climate science can become very remote and faceless and hard for people to understand. So local solutions are the only path forward. Why I say it's imperative is because, well, we're coming up to COP29 and this is going to be the 30th International Climate Conference in the world, where we have talked about and hand-run and set targets as at 2016 in Paris. We are going to be today, we are already at the highest global mean temperatures ever experienced after 30 conferences. And after identifying what's wrong, we are still talking about reducing emissions. It took 28 conferences to just bring the word fossil fuels into the mix. Let's be very clear. It took 28 conferences. The fossil fuel industry is responsible for the global warming and emissions we face today. They are not turning the tap down, and it is by far at its largest peak. So global mean temperatures are much higher than the pre-industrial 1.5 that we experienced. Therefore, we will continue to face unprecedented warming, unpredictability, high volatility, and risk we have not imagined before. We didn't imagine 2022. Nobody could imagine 1/3 of such a large country being inundated. And nobody could understand what we've done to cause it. It was not an act of God. It is directly related to global emissions. I don't know if people want to hear this, but they need to. Before we go into clapping our way to the future, that we are doing enough, we are not. The fossil fuel industry has the money, it has the agency and the will to change all this. Why I say this is because it's not going to. Not in 2024 or 25. That's what experience taught us. And people who learn from experience are the ones that survive in this game of catastrophic change. Because now we are going into a meta era, this is a meta trend, and it will be for communities to fight for their survival. This is about survival now. We're not in a cold climate, or we're not in a resilient state propped up by high resources and great agility at responses. So responses will have to be local and they will have to be triangulated by partnerships across the board, whether it's with the UN, which is always a good actor in humanitarian responses and Islamic relief, that provides the compassion and heavy lift needed where the state is at maximum overstretch. MTBs like the ADB sitting here and others can also provide a great deal of both capacity and resource. And capacity and resource have to be knit together, brought down with the kind of tools and instruments that are needed, as well as the knowledge that can be shaped for local communities from Gilgit-Baltistan to all the way down to Jagai and Dera Ismail Khan, where a warning system has been set up with sirens, like we've done in Gilgit, to warn of flash floods or other disasters that are impending. So warnings are necessary, they will save lives. We hope they will not wipe away the hydroelectric structures that dominate our north with the mountains, because that brings renewable energy. But the renewable energy solutions may be others, and may be far different from the ones we have thought about. And all is not good news, I think. Not all is bad news, because people are learning to help themselves. People are building awareness, people are understanding the power and urgency of such a fast train coming our way, and they're also understanding that it is not human nature to succumb to doom and gloom. It is human nature to be resilient. That is what all Bollywood movies are formed of. That is what all epic stories of resistance are made of. So when we assist people with that resilience, we give them hope, which is the most important thing, to rebuild their futures, to re-net ties, to find what is left and which area they are safe in, because areas that were once safe are not necessarily safe anymore, especially proximity to water or other fault lines that we may not have yet even mapped. So finding areas that are safe, finding technology solutions that leapfrog a great deal of financing and industrial manufacturing stages are also of great assistance. The good news is that young people are volunteering everywhere. They're also innovating in the tech fields to come up with smart solutions, which aren't just buzzwords, but like resilience building, which now should cover everything. Everything we do must have a resilience lens built into it. Why? Because Pakistan faced 4 to 5 years of being the most hottest areas in the world, 53 degrees in the south of the country, Sindh and Balochistan. So Turbat was one, Jacobabad was 53 degrees, Dadu was 53. This is not survivable. Nothing grows in this. You can fry an egg on the pavement. Yes, if there is a pavement. When you land at the airport, you say, my goodness, it's like being in an oven. So human beings in these communities, in these areas, which is us, have to learn and to connect that while we are in a salubrious environment, the rest of the country may not necessarily be that way. They are struggling at the bottom of the pyramids, and the stories of hope and change presented here, which I have actually bothered to see on a video, are very inspiring. And that is what I think we need. If you're not able to cover assistance and build DRR at scale, or create the resistance and resilience we need in communities and people, then what is it that we can do? We can reach out and say, this is an experiment we've done for 1,000 people. That's what you've assisted. You've assisted 1,000 people. May seem like a drop in the ocean, but the power of the increment must never be underestimated. This increment of 1,000 people, say, that you have mobilized to understand with toolkits and knowledge and actual instruments to go forward into the future, perhaps given them a new start in life, then needs to be scaled up with a story, with a matching climate, and the story is very important. You build a story for them and say, this is how you live, well, your optimal life. I won't say best life, but this is how you live your optimal life in this new century. The century isn't out to get you. It is, conflict is going up in the world as we stand here, as we speak. It should have been a very different century.